I think I got it. I think I'm actually live. Hey folks, if you're in the chat, let me know if you can actually see me. I am so sorry for starting so late. I don't know what in the world was going on with Streamlabs. I tried downloading another streaming software platform. I tried messing with settings. I think I finally got it working. It apparently thought I was trying to send my video somewhere other than YouTube because it didn't even give me the option to start my scheduled stream. I think what happened was earlier this week, I was messing around with some alternatives to YouTube because given the topics that we're talking about, I know our time on YouTube is going to be limited. So I was experimenting with using locals.com. We created a locals account. There's nothing there yet, but if you want to check it out, it's at rescuemichigan.locals.com. So like I said, nothing there yet, but we were messing around with trying to multi-stream. I haven't looked into Odyssey yet, but I've heard it's really easy to stream to Odyssey at the same time as YouTube. So yeah, we've been trying to experiment with doing other things and it ended up only just blowing up in our faces. So I am so sorry guys for starting so late. But at least we're live. I had a bad feeling we're going to have to just record a video and then just upload it after the fact. And then I would miss out on all the interactive comments. So I see a couple of people in chat. So thanks for being here. I do not have a co-host tonight. Shane Trejo could not make it. As you might know, he's a very busy guy. He's the chair of the 11th District Committee. He is also a full-time journalist for Big League Politics, and he's also helping out with some campaigns, which we might talk a little bit about. He's involved in the local race, and some of you might be involved in local races too, because there are no huge elections coming up this November, but there are some local races happening. And if you are interested in getting involved in any of those local races, the time is short for those because the election is this November, and that means the absentee period is already starting. T. Reeves says Trump is in. I don't know. Did he make it official? I mean, I did see an interview where it definitely sounded like he was making it as obvious as he could in a Fox News interview that the FEC was not letting him officially announce yet for some ridiculous reason, but he's planning to. So yeah, there's no question about that. Anyway, we've got a lot of topics to go over tonight. Obviously, of course, the big news this week has been Afghanistan, and you know, Rescue Michigan is a state-based organization, so we don't have all that much to say about international politics, but I do feel like we ought to at least say a couple of things about it because it's such an absolute catastrophe. What a disaster it is. It's absolutely shocking. Oh, T. Reeves says Trump is on now. Oh, good. I love it when my show competes with Donald Trump. That's always a bad thing, but it is what it is. But anyway, you know, and again, I don't want to ramble on for hours about Afghanistan, but as someone who has always opposed our occupation there, I like how Tucker Carlson put it earlier this week when he said, you know, I've always opposed being in Afghanistan. He said that as well, as I think the same way, but he said, if you need an appendectomy, it still matters whether the person removing your appendix is going to be using a scalpel or a hedge trimmer, I guess, or something. And how they got out of there was absolutely atrocious and embarrassing. I think, at least politically, it's to our benefit for the American people to be exposed to this unbelievable, colossal incompetence. The notion that we would abandon not just thousands and thousands of people. Chief says need to pray for all the Americans in Afghanistan. Absolutely. But even military equipment and Black Hawks and all this other stuff, it's unbelievable. And of course, if you've been following the news, and I assume you guys are all heavy consumers of news, you've been seeing the ongoing effort of the military to purge any sane people, rational people. We'll be talking a little bit more about that when we get to the vaccination lawsuits. But yeah, it's just absolutely bizarre. And you may have seen Gretchen Whitmer saying she's going to welcome in any Afghan refugees we get. And this might be a good moment to explain to you guys how asylum and refugees work, because I didn't know this until I was working at the legislature and we were asking about what we can do to stop refugee resettlement programs. And apparently the way it works is that if the U.S. gives you asylee status, it's basically citizenship. You basically have all the rights of a citizen. They can't stop you from being sent anywhere, from going anywhere. It's unbelievable. And of course, probably part of the agenda too. Now that we've destroyed Afghanistan and drained countless resources there, now the military industrial complex can also turn back and say, oh, and by the way, now we're bringing in even more refugees and immigrants. It's unreal. But I think most of the American people aren't too happy about our borders being flooded, about our leaders constantly putting other people first. And, right now, if you're going out knocking on doors, it's an easy issue to talk about. The notion that we failed to get our own people out of Afghanistan, that the military and Biden and all their speeches are clearly putting the people of Afghanistan on par with Americans. They don't put our own country first. And for the huge majority of voters, that is something that resonates, that our elected officials, their duty is supposed to be to their constituents, to the American people. They're supposed to put America first, second, and third. Serious says, out of 17,000 brought back, only 2,500 are Americans. That is nuts. I can't independently confirm that. It sounds about right to me. Wouldn't be surprised at all. And I was watching some show on the internet. I forget who it was, but he was interviewing a guy who was in the military, and he was saying, when I worked in Afghanistan, when I was deployed to Afghanistan, we had some guy who was Afghani who was, assisting us. And I think it was like, navigating flights and things like that, or whatever it was. But he said, and we worked with this guy for a long time. We'd, had lots of meals together. We trusted him implicitly. And years later, we found out he was actually working for the Taliban. He was a double agent. They have no way of vetting any of these people and knowing where their true loyalties lie. So anyway, we're going to see that situation develop again. As a state-based organization, it's not something Rescue Michigan is going to really be doing a lot about, but it's something that in the grassroots, when you're talking to voters and talking about the betrayal of our country by our government, it's a huge one. So we'll see how it develops. My prediction is all this is going to be a pretext for going back right into Afghanistan before long. So anyway, we'll have to see. Moving on, some other quick topics I want to get to before we get to the big stuff. If you've been following the news about the FBI plot to frame some people for a plot to kidnap Whitmer, which was obviously an election stunt, there's been more developments in that case. You may recall a few weeks ago, the big story was that several of the defendants were pursuing an entrapment defense, as it turned out that 6 of the people, 12 of the people involved in that group were actually working for the FBI in some capacity, either as informants or as agents themselves. Then there was the story of the one FBI agent who was arrested or the FBI informant who was arrested on gun charges. Then there was another guy who was just arrested for nearly beating his wife to death. He's out on bond, unlike the January 6th protesters, including people that never harmed anybody. And now this latest is that the defense is now alleging that the informants were also the agents were telling the informants to lie. So here's the story here. The statement is that they found text messages that indicate the FBI was pushing their paid agents to actively recruit people. And they found text messages between a special agent, Impola, and Dan, who I guess is an FBI informant, indicating Dan should destroy his text messages and instruct Dan to lie and accuse an innocent third party of being a federal agent spy to the founder of Wolverine Watchmen. He provided a transcript to the FBI, who allegedly said, copy, best thing to do is deny and accuse somebody else like Trent. The agent, again allegedly, instructed the informant to, quote, be sure to delete these. So this story is falling apart by the day. And of course, it could be months, even years before we get to the final conclusion of this case. But I have a feeling that these defendants that have asserted their defense are ultimately going to be exonerated, and good for them for doing that. Apparently, the other story is that there was one guy who pled guilty. And, people don't always plead guilty because they are guilty. People plead guilty because their lawyer advises them. You're going to be found guilty one way or the other, and this is a way to get a lighter sentence, to get out of all this. And, of course, that often involves telling stories, true or false, about other people as a way to get a lighter sentence for yourself. So as I'm trying to remember the term he used. Alan Dershowitz had a term for where people are when they've pled out, they're not they're not singing, but they're composing or something like that, he said, where, you know, you get someone and you basically persuade them to take a lesser charge in exchange for testimony that may or may not be true. So, of course, all this comes back to the election. That's what this was all really about more than anything else. This was the October surprise. This was a story that was played to the nth degree to manipulate the American public. And while the media was systematically suppressing the true stories about Hunter Biden's laptop, they were also spreading the false story that there was this advanced plot by patriots to kidnap the governor, which now increasingly becomes clear was really just all hatched by the FBI in the first place. So, unreal. All right, next up, I want to talk about some vaccine lawsuits. There have been a lot of vaccine lawsuits being filed. We mentioned this in our show last week. We were talking about how an organization had basically encouraged their members to intentionally get fired from their jobs and file lawsuits. And look, any legal advice you really need to get from your own attorney who's able to assess your own situation. I understand the nobility in taking a stand, but I also understand that, you know, some people need their jobs to provide food for their families, and it's a decision everyone has to make as an individual. And these lawsuits are being filed, and some of them are moving forward very successfully. So whether or not these mandates will be upheld or not, we're going to have to see. But I want to show you guys some of these latest stories. This is one judge in Louisiana says a vaccine mandate at Louisiana college violates religious liberty. And I believe he issued a temporary restraining order against the school prohibiting them from enforcing their vaccine mandates. So this is U.S. District Judge Terry Doty, a Trump appointee. And story's pretty straightforward. They said they have religious and medical exemptions. I think they basically made it about deeply held religious beliefs. They said the vaccines, because they believe them, and they actually are, devised from aborted fetal tissue, violating their religious beliefs. And they also dissented because the vaccine is approved for emergency use only and is therefore experimental. So that case is currently advancing favorably. That's a good sign. There are some other complaints that have been filed recently. Here's a good one. This is in the U.S. District Court for New Jersey. This was filed by Children's Health Defense against Rutgers University. We can't read through all these cases. I think two of these cases I've actually got posted at rescuemichigan.com, and maybe after the show I'll post a link in the description as well, so you guys can check these all out, and I'll also add the other two to the site as well. But this is a really good lawsuit filed in New Jersey. I'll just read a little bit of it here. Just the introduction, I think. This is an action to declare Rutgers' COVID-19 vaccine mandate unlawful. Rutgers' policy requiring all students to vaccinate for COVID-19 before returning to campus this fall is both illegal and unconstitutional. The policy is not authorized by any federal or state law. It actually conflicts with federal law and so is preempted by federal law. Most importantly, it violates the right to informed consent and to refuse unwanted medical treatment guaranteed by the 14th Amendment and Article 1 of the Constitution of the State of New Jersey. The policy violates the state law requirement to accept evidence of immunity from disease in lieu of vaccination. That's apparently a New Jersey state law. And most importantly, Rutgers University policy does not satisfy the requirements established by the Supreme Court in Jacobson versus Massachusetts, decided more than 100 years ago. Now, by the way, if you don't know Jacobson versus Massachusetts, that is the terrible case where the U.S. government mandated that people could be, or they allowed that people can be compelled to take the smallpox vaccine. Or wait, was that Buck v. Bell? It was one. I think this was Jacobson. Let's see. Yeah, Jacobson versus one was Buck v. Bell, one was Jacobson, one was the smallpox vaccination, the other one was forced sterilizations. Either way, the Jacobson case was you see 1905. The First Amendment case law has evolved a whole lot in the 116 years since that case was decided. So whether or not it would be good law anyway is questionable. But in this lawsuit, what they're even saying is, even under the Jacobson standards, this is an affront to our rights. They say fundamentally the policy is an affront to human dignity and personal freedom because it violates our basic right to control our bodies. In a free society, all people have a right to decide their medical treatment, especially to decide what to inject into their bodies. Every person has the right to make that decision voluntarily, free from coercion by anyone, and to be fully informed of the benefits and especially the risks of that decision. Rutgers cannot make that decision for its students by coercing them to get an experimental vaccine to return to campus and to continue their studies. Students face a dilemma: take an experimental vaccine and risk injury and death, or abandon academic studies at Rutgers. At stake are scholarships, enrollments in the honors program, athletics, and forfeits of years of time, study, and money invested towards a degree that could be lost or deferred indefinitely if the students are forced to leave Rutgers to start over at another, possibly out-of-state college. Students simply cannot attend college elsewhere because almost every college in New Jersey and many colleges across the country, following Rutgers' lead, are now requiring COVID vaccines. Any transfer would jeopardize their degrees or delay their graduation indefinitely. Anyway, this goes on for pages. I'm not going to read the whole thing tonight here for you, but I'll put a link in the description if y'all want to check that out. Some other interesting cases. Here's a case. This is appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. So this is definitely one to follow because this will give us some indication on where the Supreme Court is going with these. It's a petition for writ of mandamus filed in California. This is, again, a lawsuit against a vaccine mandate, and again, relating to a college. So it says here, students with natural immunity are treated like second-class citizens, weekly swabs at the nose, daily masks on the face, and more. Did the district court commit an abuse of discretion by neglecting to enforce federal law regarding the emergency use authorization? So basically, the lower courts in California didn't issue any decisions of any substance. They just ignored it, basically. The Court of Appeals just said, nope, we're not going to consider this. And they say, did the district court omit an extreme departure from law by asserting that informed refusal of a genetic vaccine is not a fundamental right requiring strict scrutiny? And did the district court commit an abuse of discretion by neglecting to enforce federal law? So another interesting case, and this one has now been appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. So, you know, even if the court doesn't take it up, their clerks are looking at it. So all that's happening. Also, there is another case now filed in the military. There's some military soldiers who are suing the Secretary of Defense, suing the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and suing the FDA director. That's been filed again, and these are documented survivors of COVID-19, and again, seeking they can't force them to take a vaccination under existing military regulations, federal law, and the U.S. Constitution. So, all very interesting lawsuits. You see, these are all pretty long, too. This one's actually only 15 pages. But it's a class action, so they're suing on behalf of any similarly situated soldiers. The exact number of the class is not precisely known, but there are currently in excess of 1.8 million members of the active duty component of the armed forces. The class is so numerous that joinder of individual members is impracticable, if not impossible. Relief sought is common to the entire class, so they're seeking to have a decision that prohibits the military from acquiring vaccines, at least in the case of those who are survivors of COVID-19. But let's see what they say here, actually. Factual background. First cause of action, violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. Okay, so they're suing on the grounds that they didn't follow the proper procedures for crafting these requirements. They ignored the plaintiff's right to informed consent and vaccinating members of the armed forces without complying to applicable federal law and implementing regulations. Their failure to follow federal law and regulations creates a legal wrong against the plaintiffs. And also, the case involves an actual controversy surrounding the legality of any orders or actions the DoD has taken with regard to vaccinating service members against COVID-19 in the absence of the Secretary's and DoD statutory obligations. So it sounds like one of the big things they're going after is the fact that they're doing this with emergency use authorization. So anyway, you can check out this case as well. Either Google it, or I'll post a link either in the description or it'll be posted at the Rescue Michigan site. But yeah, lots of litigation is happening, folks. It's probably happening everywhere. These are just a few cases. I'm sure there are more out there, but these are really interesting. So anyway, all this is to say, these issues are being litigated. There's no question these lawsuits are going to be moving forward. And where they go, we'll see. I suspect they'll ultimately go to the Supreme Court, but whether the Supreme Court is going to rule in the favor of liberty, we just don't know. We don't know. Well, we probably do know what the Democrats on the Democrat appointees will do. We don't know what John Roberts will do. We don't know what Amy Coney Barrett will do. And frankly, we don't even know what Brett Kavanaugh would do, unfortunately. So there you go. By the way, I hope you guys have been paying attention to all these bad decisions Amy Coney Barrett's been making. I was warning about her in the beginning when she was first up for the nomination, because she had just months earlier upheld lockdowns in Illinois. I think it was the Illinois Republican Party sued the state over their lockdown policies, And yeah, Coney Barrett, I believe she actually cited the Jacobson case. It was that same case about smallpox, and again, totally ignoring a century of First Amendment developments in the court system. And that right there was enough of a red flag. But you'll recall the conservative media propping up Amy Coney Barrett and saying what a great candidate she was. There were others that were by far better. There was Barbara Lagoa. There was another one, I forget. She was even better than Lagoa, but she was really young. She used to work for Alliance Defending Freedom. But I remember Ned Ryan, who runs an outfit called True Majority, I think it is. Is that it? Ned Ryan. He was on Fox News saying, "Oh, what a great candidate she is. We would oppose if Trump was to bring up Lagoa." So remember, feel free to take a trip through down memory lane there to see all the conservative establishment people singing Amy Coney Barrett's praises. She refused to take up a case on vaccine choice just this past week. I think it was against Indiana University. Let me see if I can pull that one up real quick. Shouldn't take long to find. Yeah, Amy Coney Barrett leaves Indiana University's vaccine mandate in place. Supreme Court will not interfere with an Indiana University's vaccine mandate. Amy Coney Barrett turned down a request from a group of students to block the school's requirement that students be vaccinated against the virus. Barrett is responsible for emergency appeals from Indiana and denied the students' request without comment, without seeking a response from the state, and without referring the request to the full court for a vote, suggesting that she and other justices did not regard it as a particularly close case. This is something we got to keep slamming on, folks. This is atrocious. These people are terrible, and Amy Coney Barrett is terrible. So, not much good news to say about that. So anyway, all right, let's talk about some good news here. Well, first of all, you see on our site, we're seeing more and more county Republicans are passing resolutions against Ed McBroom and some also the other senators, Tice and Bison, for the Senate Oversight Committee report, which directed the Attorney General to go after, quote unquote, those exploiting falsehoods for personal gain regarding the election, which was a very obvious reference to Matt DePerno, who was mentioned 8 times in the lawsuit. There's a resolution in Oceana County we covered last week. They actually used exactly the language that we came up with. Oakland County and Macomb counties were different, but also excellent. Macomb counties was unanimous. Oakland counties was reportedly 40-7. And this is bringing some real heat to the Republican legislature and teaching them a lesson that they can't just slap us in the face and then, expect that there's going to be no response from us. So we encourage people to keep the pressure up on them. I actually attended my county GOP's meeting last night, and I'm in Washtenaw County, where Senator Tice is actually one of those 3 who signed off on the letter. And there was actually a resolution. There was a censure motion that was being discussed, being brought up. So Senator Tice came out and got grilled by the committee for quite some time. She said that she didn't know that Ed McBroom had actually been sued by Matt DePerno himself and didn't realize there was this political axe to grind in the background there. She also claimed that she didn't write the language about calling upon the Attorney General to investigate DePerno and anybody else, which I don't think is good enough, frankly. She was in many ways contrite about the whole thing, but she did not apologize to us. She did not retract any statements from us. She was quite argumentative about some of the points that were claimed in the report, and I think our senior member, someone who's been in the county party longer than anybody else, put it best. He said the thing that was missing from that report was that there were not proper safeguards in place to prevent election fraud and for people to determine the extent that it happened. And there was nothing in there about that. Now, what I think we're going to do, we were not able to get a vote on the censure resolution because the politician came in and had her story. And by the way, personally, I am a little conflicted about Senator Tice because she is actually outstanding on many other issues. She is the champion in the Senate on opposing critical racist theory and a lot of other topics. She is one of the few more conservative members, and I think, frankly, Ed McBroom was the one that drafted that, and I don't know, I think it was a mistake on her part. But I think what we're going to do is challenge her. Okay, well, you know, you keep saying, and the committee report itself says we're going to update it as facts develop, and it's been months now. So it's time to update that report, and maybe you want to post a retraction or post an apology or take out the language that called for the Attorney General. Make it clear, show the people by your actions that you actually are apologetic, you are contrite about it, you do want to make right the wrong. And if that doesn't happen in the next month, maybe the censure motion will come up again. Also, in the meantime, you know, feel free to wail away at McBroom, Bison. They've never been good on much of anything out there. And these resolutions are having a strong effect. They are putting the party, I think, teaching the party some newfound respect for the grassroots. And by the way, we're going to be talking about the citizen-initiated law projects in just a moment here. A couple other things, though, I did want to mention. I talked about this in a video we put out earlier this week. You may have seen the news story about Senator Mike Shirkey saying he is not going to attend the Mackinac Policy Conference in September because the lobbyists are demanding that the lawmakers, and I think everybody else too, but that they all show them their vaccination papers as a condition of attending the policy conference. I'm going to take this off the screen here. And the point I made in the video was, first of all, good for Shirkey for standing up for himself. But secondly, this is an example of how the left can suddenly change a paradigm and nobody seems to notice. And the backstory to that is, you know, there's always the saying about politicians being in bed with lobbyists, but it's always kind of understood, especially by the politicians, that they're the ones that are supposed to be receiving to be wearing the pants in that relationship. The lobbyists are supplicants. The lobbyists are the ones that are giving them money to promote their bills. But in that relationship, I mean, one of the things most lobbyists are what we call access-based lobbyists, which means people hire a lobbyist to represent their interests because the lobbyists have access to the politicians. And the politicians won't tolerate pressure from lobbyists because the lobbyists will lose their access. But now all of a sudden, it's perfectly normal and okay for lobbyists to tell politicians that they have to take a shot, even if they don't need it and don't want it, and show them their paperwork proving they've done their homework, they've gotten their injection of gene therapy, and now it's okay for them to go to the Mackinac conference. By the way, I want to clarify something because there is a lot of confusion out there among people. There are two Mackinac conferences happening in September, back to back, and they are different. They're two different things. One is the Mackinac Policy Conference, which is an annual event put on by the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce, which even among chambers of commerce is lousy. And then the other is the Mackinac Republican Leadership Conference, and that's put on every 2 years by the Michigan Republican Party. And usually I think the Mackinac Policy Conference happens in July. This year it's happening in September, but they're two separate things. So if you're hearing from Republicans talking about the Mackinac Republican Conference, that is separate from the lobbyists' legislative conference. The Mackinac Regional or the Mackinac Policy Conference is attended by Democrats and Republicans, and it's hosted by the lobbyist class. It's their biggest regular lobbying party of the year, and that's the one that Shirkey has said he's not going to attend because they're requiring that they show them their papers. But anyway, here's the point I would make, and this is something that anybody in the grassroots might want to pursue with their own lawmakers. Are you going to the Mackinac Leadership Conference, the policy conference, where they have told you you have to show them your papers? I would submit that any lawmaker, doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter if you're pro-vaccine or not. The idea that a lawmaker is going to be required to show their papers to a lobbyist to attend their event where they're supposed to be the honored guests. would prove that that lawmaker has absolutely no self-respect, is an absolute puppet of the lobbying class, or cares so little about the issues that he allows himself to be pushed around by lobbyists. So I want to find out, I want to know, and you should find out, and you should know, if your lawmaker is going to attend the Mackinac Policy Conference. Call them up, ask them. They're your lawmakers. They should tell you what their appearances are going to be. I would ask them point blank, do you plan to attend the Mackinac Policy Conference this year, in light of the fact that lobbyists are demanding that you show them your papers? I think that'd be a great issue to leverage Grassroots on to talk about in the media. Our politician is so shameful that he or she will show his vaccination papers to lobbyists, which just goes to show what a shameless puppet he or she is. That's a good issue to use going into that election season. So, good time to get them on record on that. And be sure you call them up right around the time the conference is happening, mid-September, and let them know, hey, where's my lawmaker? Oh, he's on the island, is he? I've got somewhere here a calendar for the, let's see if I can find it. I've got the House calendar. By the way, the legislature's been out of session for the past 2 months. Basically, they did have a little bit of session this past week, but they're going to be out of session for the next 2 weeks, and then they're coming back after Labor Day. The schedule is really light, which is, I suppose, not necessarily a bad thing. There's the old saying, you know, no man's life, liberty, or property is safe when the legislature is in session. But this seems even lighter than usual. I'll show you. Here we go. This is the House calendar. So this is their schedule for the rest of the year. They are out of session until they've got one day on September 9th, and then one more day, the 14th. So there's probably no committee meetings those weeks. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Those are the Mackinac conferences. Then they're in session for the next 7 weeks. Then they get another big break around Election Day. And of course, a Christmas break too. So that's the House calendar, but the Senate calendar is going to be very similar. So there's that. Oh, I forgot one more lawsuit I forgot to mention. Restaurants in New York suing the mayor, Bill de Blasio, so that's cool. All right, what else do we have on the calendar here? Another grassroots project you guys might want to pursue in Kent and Ottawa County. Their health officials have implemented mask mandates for children K to 12, on the basis of medical gibberish, claiming that, you know, children who are barely even affected by COVID and the masks that don't even help them spread it should be mandatory. Now, you can't really pressure bureaucrats, but the politically effective tactic to pressuring bureaucrats is pressure their bosses. So that would be your county commissioners. You know, if I was in Ottawa County or Kent County, I'd be demanding that our commissioners take away the ability of the health department to issue those mandates. So that's something to think about. And again, take the lesson. If you're dealing with bureaucrats, the people you go after are the elected officials. Those people are the targets. So, all right, we got a couple more things I want to go over. First, we have the citizen-initiated proposals. There's one that is active. That's Unlock Part 2. I have not yet seen the petition sheets for those yet, but maybe they're coming out any day now. And then there's 2 election integrity proposals now being talked about. I've got news on the one that we've been talking about for a long time. It's been in development for months now. And then there's also another one that was just announced this past week. And then I think for the remainder of the program, I want to talk about being effective. You know, that I think is the most important thing. That's what Rescue Michigan is really all about, is helping people be more effective as political organizers, as advocates for policy. And we're gonna talk about that, because there's a lot of ways. Frankly, there's a lot of different organizations and groups and people looking for your time. And we're going to talk about ways to be most effective with the time that we have. So going back, let's talk about these citizen-initiated laws. Now, we've said all along, these are, first of all, important policy fights, and probably equally important, these are great organization building tools. In fact, that's one of the 3 most important things of effective political leadership, is growing your organization. And going out and getting signatures is a great way to do that. Now, unlock part 2, we've talked about that before. This is the proposal to prohibit the health departments from being able to issue emergency orders without approval from the legislature after, I think, a month's time. And in fact, I remember in our last video, we complained about why the proposal didn't totally strip away the county's ability to impose these mandates, absent the county commission's approval. But nonetheless, still worthwhile overall, still takes away the governor's power to make statewide mandates through her health department. So those petition sheets should be getting in the field any day now. Let me see if there's any news from Unlock about that in this past week. I don't think I have heard anything, but let's take a look and see here. James asks, Garrett Soldano got a shot. I don't know. I hadn't heard that before. Interesting. Let's see. We've got... Hold on, I'll show you. I'm just looking at the screen. This is Unlock Michigan. They have a sign-up form, but they're not asking for your address. So, oh, here we go. Host a petition pickup and drop-off location. Well, so they do have at least some kind of sign-up form. So, yeah, get those petitions, folks. This is a worthwhile cause. And it's a great way to build an organization, getting these signatures. Now, as for election integrity, citizen-initiated proposals. So what I've heard about the big one that we've been talking about for a long time is that there has been substantial back and forth in negotiations with the legislature on what the policy is going to be. And the big reason for that is that Ann Boland, the chair of the House Elections Committee, has been trying her darndest to neuter the proposal. And in particular, she wanted them to take out the requirement that absentee ballots must have driver's license number or copy of the license itself provided. According to my sources, Boland has basically made 2 claims. One, James asks, sorry, I meant a chance to win. Didn't mean took a vaccination. I don't know, James. In the governor's race, some people are wondering why Craig hasn't announced yet, and they're wondering if maybe he's getting cold feet about running, which means the establishment's candidate not in the race yet. Someone else just jumped in. He's, I think, some kind of police chief. Not in Detroit because that's James Craig, but some other police chief. I don't know whether he's the new establishment's pick or an alternative, or if he's just another guy entering the race. Don't know if he's going to be financially competitive or not. I mean, at this point right now, Garrett Soldano has posted by far the most competitive fundraising numbers. By far. Now, if James Craig jumps in and he is the establishment's pick, he will probably be able to raise at least that much and more. Running a competitive race that's statewide, you have to have a lot of money to do that. If you get to a certain point financially, you'll have enough to at least be competitive. Obviously, it's always greater if you have more. You know, the more money you've got, the better. No question about that. You've got to get to some number to be competitive at all. And Soldano might make that. No question. But anyway, going back to talking about these citizen-initiated proposals. So Boland basically pressured the group that's putting together the project, which I wish was us, but we don't have $2 million kicking around. But there is a group out there. I think they're going to be calling themselves Secure My Vote, like my MI. What they're doing is they're trying to get confirmation that if they get the signatures, the legislature will actually pass the dang thing, which is important because if they don't pass it, even if you get the signatures, instead of being automatically law of the land, it goes onto the November 2022 ballot. And then you've got to persuade the majority of voters to vote yes. And that's going to be controversial. It's going to be tough. So they're trying to get the legislative buy-in that they need. And Boland was apparently doing everything possible to take out the requirement that senior citizen, well, every citizen, every absentee voter has to show ID. And Boland apparently made 2 claims. One was that it would hurt turnout for, seniors of an advanced age, which I don't believe that argument for a second. Number one, my grandpop is 93 years old and he has his ID. And he knows how to copy down a number. I mean, the people who will be who will have more difficulty voting are the very people we have the biggest concern about vote fraud. You know, the nursing home scam, that these nurses help the people vote and fill out their ballot for them. And of course, you know, vote for the Democrats. That's how that whole game is played, is taking advantage of seniors who are physically or mentally incapable of completing their ballots and helping them, taking advantage of them, voting for the candidates they want, not necessarily the candidates that the seniors want. So that's one issue. And then she also claims this will impose additional work for clerks because Bolin cares more about clerks than about election integrity. Now, if you've seen some of our earlier videos where we covered the hearings in the House and Senate elections committees, the clerks associations, there's two of them. There's the Municipal Clerks Association and the County Clerks Association. They're totally controlled by the radical left. They had a hearing on a bill that we were vigorously opposing to create an early election day and mandate every city and township in Michigan have an early election day 10 days before the election. Because that's what we wanted, right? We wanted more complexity, more difficulty, more opportunities for election fraud. Let's just have an early election day 2 Saturdays before the election. And the clerks associations, both of them testified, this doesn't go far enough. We want 2 full weeks of early voting. That's what their position was. So despite the fact that these municipal clerks, county clerks associations, most of their members are probably Republicans, if you think about it, because most of the Democrats are concentrated in a small number of municipalities. You know, how many clerks in 83 Michigan counties are Democrats? I'd bet most of them are not. I mean, obviously, Wayne County, Washington County, you're going to have Democrat clerks, but most counties probably don't. So why are these associations doing what the members probably don't want them to do? Also, by the way, you know, every time I've ever asked a clerk anything, their answer is, let me ask my deputy. Clerks don't do a lot of work. They put the work on their subordinates. So I'm not opposed to giving the clerks a little bit of extra work to do if it ensures our elections are secure. And that's just my personal opinion. Here, we can take this off of the screen here. So what I've now heard, the latest, is that the group has grown a spine and is putting the language back in, requiring ID to vote in all cases, including absentee. And that's outstanding news if that's true. The only thing I'm waiting on now is for them to release the dang thing and put it out there, which I hope will be happening soon. But they are tough to get a hold of. But it sounds like they've actually strengthened the bill and made it worthwhile, because we know they're going to go after Zuckerbucks, and that's good. We know they're going to go after requiring ID for voting. It's not everything that we want. As we have said, though, the challenge is that there will be a legal challenge where the other side will claim people didn't know what they were voting for. If you put too much things in there, they'll say it was too complicated. And that's a problem we just have to deal with. So we hope they go after the most important things. And the fact that they're putting back in ID for absentee ballots, I think, is a huge one. I personally think absentee ballot fraud is the biggest source of fraud. I know a lot of people out there think about the Dominion voting machines and all that. But, well, we could talk about that for a long time. But, you know, you have to understand, to be able to rig a vote with a voting machine, you also have to be able to control it in multiple precincts all over the place, and dealing with a ton of logistics and personnel, never knowing where a recount might happen. So you've got to stuff ballots, real ballots, because we have paper ballots to correspond to whatever you do electronically, if you can do that. The old-fashioned way is absentee ballots. When I recorded that training in Detroit, where they were training poll workers, and they were saying, we're going to turn away poll challengers. They said, oh yeah, they're coming. They're coming. And whose ballots are they going to be challenging? And the audience goes, absentee ballots. That's right, absentee ballots. Because we all know absentee ballots that's what the Carter Baker commission report said. Absentee ballots are the biggest security problem in elections, and therefore they are the biggest source of fraud. So if they put that in there, I mean, that's going to mean the difference between whether this is worthwhile or not. So that's a big positive development, and I can't wait for that petition to come out. We can start circulating petitions on that. Now, there's also another petition drive announced this past week. I made a little video about that, so you can just check that out. Although I'll just give you the breakdown, basically. A lot of people, I think 8 or 9 people got together in Hillsdale this past week and said they're going to pursue a citizen-initiated law requiring a forensic audit. So I have some concerns about that one, and I laid them out in the video. The first thing is the language itself, which we'll just have to wait and see. I know there's already been some back and forth between Rep. Cara and I think Jovan Pulitzer about the language that was in Representative Cara's forensic audit legislation. So, you know, we won't know until we see what the language is that they propose and what exactly it will entail. You know, the next challenge is fundraising, and will they be able to raise the amount of money it takes to run a successful citizen-initiated law project? It takes millions of dollars. And several of the candidates there, of the people that were at that conference, are actually candidates themselves. 2 are running for state rep, 1's running for governor, 1's running for attorney general. And those people all have to, you know, spend and raise money for their own campaigns. But maybe they do raise the money, maybe they do have good language, then everything's a go, you know. But there's also a timing issue. Till they get the language, till they get the approval, till they get the signatures, till they get the signatures approved, we're already late into next year. So if they can turn this around very quickly, that's one thing, but they're going to have a tough deadline. And then finally, if the legislature doesn't actually pass what they get their signatures for, it goes on the November 2022 ballot. Now, we've seen, I mean, first of all, the Senate Oversight Committee report says we oppose a forensic audit. That's 3 senators right there. We only have a 3-seat majority in the Senate and only a 3-seat majority in the state house. So if all we lose is 3 senators or representatives in either chamber, they don't have the votes. You have to remember that, you know, half the Senate and a third of the House are term limited. Unless they're seeking higher office, they don't need to care what voters think anymore. They're not subject to pressure because they're going to be retiring. They're not going to just keep, you know, if you get a huge amount of constituents who tell a politician, we need you to do this, but they're retiring, you can't force them to vote yes for something. So the challenge in getting almost every single Republican in both chambers to vote for that is just a big challenge. And if they don't have that, it's going to go on the ballot in November 2022. And again, it's an uphill battle. I mean, number one, in all ballot proposals, citizens are disinclined to vote for something they think is more complicated than they can understand. They're more inclined to believe opposition. Like when we attacked Proposal 1 in 2015, we pointed out all kinds of things, that there's so much in here in this proposal that's not money for, this is a big proposal in 2015 to raise a lot of taxes for supposedly fixing the roads, but there's also a bunch of other garbage in there. So we attacked it in a big way on the fact that there was so much other garbage in there. And that's all it takes, even for Democrat voters. It was defeated more than 4-1. Democrats were voting no on this thing for that. So you would have to have a huge majority of the Republicans plus a substantial number of the independents to vote yes for it. And remember, it has to pass on the ballot in November 2022, which means all the activism that you want to have on campaigns and elections for governor, attorney general, secretary of state, Congress, state house, state senate. There's only so much time we all have. And all of those races are going to be coming to a head before that election. So the situation we really want is for this to pass the legislature. So there's going to be a challenge in getting the language good. There's going to be a challenge in the raising the money. There's going to be a challenge in getting it all done quickly enough. And there's going to be a challenge in getting it through the legislature. And there's going to be a challenge in getting it passed on the ballot. So I'm not saying it's something, you know, I'm not disavowing it, but just be aware. These are all considerations that you have to keep in mind for doing something like this. So anyway, all that said, we've been going for just about an hour minus the 10 minutes I was late diddling with my Streamlabs to get this thing to work. But I want to talk about being effective. That's what this is really all about. You know, my goal personally is to change public policy. You know, everything else is just a means to an end. I want my liberty back. You know, whether that's electing a certain politician or not depends on the case, depends on the race, depends what the issues are, depends what impact it's going to have on that. The goal is to change policy. So how do we go about doing that? Well, mostly it's by, number one, electing as many real champions of liberty to these public offices as we can. And number two is for any of the politicians that are subject to grassroots pressure, making sure they feel the pressure that they vote our way when the time comes. Creating the environment where the politician's best personal political path is supporting liberty when it comes up in a contentious vote. So there are three basic means to that end. Number one is growing your organization. And right now, as has been the case all year long, there are people out there everywhere that need to get involved. You know, there was this big conference in Grand Rapids this weekend, was it American Revival or Awakening or something? And I watched a little bit of it. I saw Mike Lindell's speech. I saw the pastor that was speaking before him. And it struck me, a lot of this was like preaching to the choir. I mean, it's saying, you know, this is going on and this is going on. You guys got to do this. You guys got to do this. Yeah, yeah. I'm like, you know, but they all already know this. You know, the issue is the people who aren't there, the people who are in your neighborhood, who are getting enough of the independent media to know what's really going on, but they're not going to know the details of the candidates and the campaigns and the issues when the election rolls around if they're not engaged in a local political organization. And growing your organization is something that we can all do. Just get a friend, go out and knock on doors. Certainly helps if you get a voter file at rescuemichigan.com where we tell you who the Republican households are and the non-Republican households, so you don't have to knock on the bad guys' houses. But either way, that's the way to get more people to start coming in to your group, to start coming into your meetings, and to start getting them engaged. And the potential out there for doing that is just about endless. And of course, there's all these issues. Now we're gonna be interviewing a guy. I haven't gotten it scheduled just yet, but it's gonna be in a week or so. He was talking about he worked for a candidate that was able to win the city of St. Clair Shores for his Republican candidate. It was the first Republican to win that election in over 50 years. And the issue that they were actually able to leverage with extreme success was that the Democrats were all on board with slavery reparations. And he's telling, you know, we go to the door and say, do you support being ordered by the government to give money to other people when you never owned slaves? You're like, oh my God, yeah, you know, it was a winning issue. So he was talking about, he attended a lecture on critical race theory, or as I like to call it, cynical racist theory. And he said, I mean, it was a great lecture, but it was about an hour's worth of talking points, and it's just too much. You got to get down to that elevator speech. You know, something you can just get out to people and convey to people. We'll be talking to him in a week or so, and he'll really give us the insights about how that all works. Now, you might be able to distill some of that down. Like I would say cynical racist theory, it's real simple. They're teaching our kids to hate themselves and to hate each other. They're telling white students, these children, they're telling, you're all oppressors, you're all racists. They're telling black kids, you're all oppressed. You all need the help of the government, you know, and so on and so forth. So I think that's not too hard to explain, but his point is well taken, that it's real easy to make an issue more complicated than it needs to be. But going out, knocking on doors, talking to people, you'll start to identify these hot button topics, and you'll naturally start improving your ability to make these shorter presentations, to make them something where you can get right to the point and get to identifying people. So anyway, first thing, growing your organization, reaching out, talking to your neighbors, getting people engaged that you don't normally get engaged, just talking to other people online. And remember also, politics is intensely geographical. So there's that. Next thing is candidates and campaigns. If you have a genuinely great candidate, and I say that with caution because a lot of people turn into different people when they actually get elected. But if you've got a good candidate, someone you know personally, someone you know is going to be a champion, and maybe even just someone you know is going to be solid against an opponent who's extraordinarily terrible, you might get involved in candidates and campaigns, or start laying the foundation for the candidates and campaigns we're going to be seeing next year when a lot of the big elections happen. And by the way, if you're involved in a local campaign, those are starting to come up very, very soon. You know, the election's in November, but the absentee ballots are going to start going out in just a few weeks now. Depending on where you live, you may have any number of considerations, and you need to do a little bit of research on this. I was helping out a candidate for a local office this past week whose district is literally the size of a whole state house district, depending on your municipality. Some local elections have seats that are districted. So, for example, a county commission might be broken down into the geographic regions within the county. Some are at large, where the district is the entire jurisdiction. And if it's an entire jurisdiction, like I remember a few years ago, I was talking to a guy who wanted to run for Oakland County Sheriff. And he was, I think he ran security for the Federal Reserve Bank of Detroit, something like that. And he was just want to talk to him, see what his, what his issues were, what his viability might be, because we didn't know what was going to happen in Oakland County that year. If Mike Bouchard was going to retire, or maybe run for county executive, or whatever. Turns out he never did either of those things, so it was a non-issue. But anyway, I was explaining to the guy, if you're running for county sheriff in Oakland County, your district is larger than congressional seats. Your district is millions of people. That's an enormous amount of ground to cover, and it's going to take some considerable resources. It just will. Then again, I've also talking to some people who are working on a municipal election in a city of 2 precincts, and that's an easy amount of ground to cover between now and November. That's even starting right now. It just takes a handful of people to make phone calls, to run the absentee chase, to knock on doors. I mean, the candidate should always be knocking on doors, but the volunteers and people helping out, they can maybe do the candidate's dirty work and be the one who's attacking the opponent and exposing the opponent's record. That kind of stuff. Organizing local coffee hours and luncheons and things where the candidate can introduce themselves to the community, that sort of thing. Distributing flyers, knocking on doors, all that good stuff. And those are happening now. If you're in a campaign for any election that's going to be coming up this November, when the absentee chase starts, and by the way, a lot of local candidates don't really know a lot about running campaigns. A lot of them don't have professional campaign staff to turn to. So make sure you tell them, look, you need to be on top of the absentee chase. And what that means is you go to your clerk's office and you request daily updates on who's applied for an absentee ballot, who's being mailed absentee ballots. And you want to get a hold of that list of people and ideally either knock on their door or call them up. You go to rescuemichigan.com. We offer voter files that have phone numbers on them. So you can call up the voters who are requesting absentee ballots and you can contact them and you can give them your spiel for your candidate or tell them why the incumbent is such a terrible guy. And there may be any number of things. Maybe you've got a school board that's teaching cynical racist theory in your schools. Maybe you've got a city hall that's condoning people occupying the streets, things like that. Maybe you've got a county commission that's spending taxpayer dollars for Planned Parenthood, like Oakland County's is. All kinds of issues where there's opportunities to engage voters. You don't have to be pro-life to be opposed to your county spending your hard-earned tax dollars, not for roads, not for schools, but for abortion. So, anyway, candidates and campaigns. And then the other big thing is holding politicians accountable. We've talked a little bit about this earlier, getting them on record on election integrity, getting them on record on vaccine mandates, getting them on record on all the issues that you care about. These campaigns, these candidates, send them a survey. If you want, just start you don't have to incorporate a C3, a nonprofit or a PAC to have a political organization. I was talking to somebody the other day. They wanted to help out a candidate, and so they wanted to start a PAC. And I said, well, if you're going to put out materials that say, vote for so-and-so, it's an independent expenditure. Yeah, you have to have a PAC for that. And you've got to do all kinds of things you don't want to do. You have to report your contributions. You have to follow campaign finance limits. Most importantly, you have to print on your materials paid for by such and such PAC. But if you're just a group of organized local people, you don't even have to incorporate. As long as all you do is say, this guy did yada, 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 but this candidate stands for our individual liberties and stands for sound usage of our tax dollars, or whatever you want to say, as long as you don't say what's called the magic words, which are express advocacy, saying vote for, elect, defeat, vote for Smith, cast your ballot for. If you don't say those things, if all you do is say so-and-so is a dirtbag, so-and-so is a great guy, so-and-so is pro-life, so-and-so is pro-abortion, whatever the issues are, As long as you're engaging in issue discussion, that's free speech. You don't have to disclose donors. You don't have to any limitation on contributions. You can say what you want to say. Anything that falls short of express advocacy, you're allowed to do. KLSNC85 says, soon I'll be able to inspect the tabulators in my county. The county clerk is being most helpful. Cool. Which county is that? Let me know in the comments there, or in the chat. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what you find out. Yeah, we've talked about getting these politicians on record. I talked about getting Senator Tice on record. Are you going to retract the statements when you put out, I mean, are you going to retract the statements now that you have been shown that you had in this report, despite having no factual allegations of misconduct by anybody, any profiteering off false election claims, putting that paragraph in there? Clearly calling upon the Attorney General to investigate Matt DePerno in violation of his right to raise money for litigation for elections, you know, stuff like that. Are you going to get him on record for going to the Mackinac policy conference and being a total shill for the lobbyists? You're going to get him on record on all kinds of these other issues. You know, it's never too soon. So those are the biggest three things, folks. I know we all love doing rallies and demonstrations and getting in these get-togethers. But the biggest thing to be most effective is grow an organization, get the politicians on record, hold them accountable, and when appropriate in election season, if you've got the right campaign, you've got the right candidates, you've got someone you support, help them out. You know, right now in the statewide races, the only person I know that I'm strongly supporting is Christina Caramo. But there's other candidates out there, and go wherever you feel called to help out. And maybe that'll be a congressional race, depending on your congressional district. Maybe it'll be a state house race or state senate race. Maybe it'll be a school board race or any one of those. But either way, all of those other things that you're doing legislatively, electorally, it all is a numbers game in politics. It's all about how big of an organization that you can grow. So, you know, use the tools that we have at Rescue Michigan. If you get your precinct voter file, it will give you a roadmap for where to find people who are the most likely going to be interested in your campaigns and your causes and your get-togethers and your organizations. So that's pretty much all I've got for tonight, guys. We've gone over a lot of stuff, and I'm out of topics. I'm sure there are things I forgot about, but in the chat, by all means, I see we still got some people watching. So if you have any questions from me, I'm always happy to answer them. I'll give it a few more minutes here. Otherwise, that'll be it for this week, and we'll let you know the next time we've got a live stream going. Allegan County, we're looking for any type of telecommunications stuff. The clerk says they didn't buy that option for many reasons. There could still be chips that can communicate. Interesting. Yeah, that'd be good to know. And the clerk should know too. When I was a poll worker in the city of Detroit, we absolutely did connect our tabulators to the internet. And I know that for a fact because we took the modem out at the end of the night and plugged it into the machine. And then it attempted to report the election results. What actually happened in our precinct was that the machine first connected to the Wayne County Clerk's office and said it successfully copied the results out. And then multiple attempts failed to connect to the city of Detroit's receiving board to report the results. So they were definitely connecting those machines to the internet. Now, only at the end of the night, but you know, if your concern is electronic manipulation of the ballots or of the numbers, you know, that'd be the only time you need to do it is when you're reporting the results. So who knows? But again, guys, as I say, I caution you. There are paper ballots. There are receipt tapes that the poll workers see. So there's only so much they can do there. And, you know, I mean, we'll see what we see if we ever find that. But I just want to remind everybody, we can prove the election was manipulated because, number one, it was already established by the state court of claims that the process by which they processed absentee ballots was unlawful. They didn't conduct lawful signature matches. I mean, right, and we have no way of knowing what impact that would have on the election. And the legal standard is supposed to be if the number of ballots in question exceeds the margin of victory for a campaign, that's supposed to trigger a whole, I mean, typically the remedy is you redo the election. And obviously that's not going to happen. anymore, unfortunately, but at least get the facts down. But, you know, we can prove they unlawfully processed absentee ballots. We can prove they unlawfully impeded poll challengers. We can prove in Detroit they manipulated who they were hiring to run the elections. And those are all huge. Those are all absolutely huge. So, you know, I really feel like the more we focus on the Dominion stuff, the more we're getting, because remember, this is the case you got to make to the public, the case you got to make to the electorate, especially if we're doing a citizen initiated law, but also the case that you got to make to the legislature, because they're going back to the voters. And that's why we're always trying to cleave as close as we can to the things we know we can absolutely prove with the information that we already have. So John says, I'm competing with the Trump rally. Yeah, we were told. And that's too bad, but that's the way it goes. So there's always something happening out there. So we'll have the video on YouTube. It'll be up. And by the way, we mirror all our videos on Rumble, and we're looking into using other channels as well. The problem is right now, only YouTube does these long live streams. Locals, I think you can't go for more than a half hour. Rumble, they've now implemented live streams, but not live chat yet. So I believe me, I know we hate YouTube. They're an evil company. But right now, they're the only game in town for these things. So hopefully we'll have more options coming out soon. KLS and C85 says that's a railroad engine I ran out of Pop Pop from 1988 to 94. Very cool. All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to call it a stream for tonight. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for all you do for liberty. If you're watching this, make sure you like and share and subscribe. Obviously, the algorithm is not our friend. The only way we really get any traffic on our YouTube streams is from the emails we send out. So thanks for everything, and appreciate the support. We're going to definitely be rolling out more and more projects and things in the weeks to come, and we can't wait for the election reform, just an initiated law coming out hopefully very soon.